Alrighty, welcome. I am obviously not Keith Stefanko. Hopefully he's going to come running in here any minute and let me go sit down. But he's making it across town from a class or a meeting or something. But welcome to our Proverbs class. He left me to be the bad guy and to administer the midterm exam. So we're going to dive into that in a minute. If you're joining us online, welcome. I didn't realize till Keith told us we have an international audience. And so we're glad you're here, even if you may be watching it time delayed a little later. Okay, so I've got 2 or 3 screens worth of questions here. And I'm going to put them up and give you a little bit of time to look at it and think about what your answers might be. And then we'll see who's been listening in class. So if you'll, Matt, if you'll go with the first slide. He was kind enough to send me an answer key. So. All right, so take a look at that. Who authored the bulk of Proverbs? What 2 voices are used to contrast during the conversation between the father and the young man? And true what can be attained by those who listened and apply the Proverbs? And then somebody speaks to 3 groups of people. And she, okay, hopefully if you answer 4 right, you'll know who she is. She calls out to some folks. So take a look at that. I wish I had the Jeopardy theme song. We'd play about 30 seconds of that and go into it. All right, first one's pretty easy. Who authored the bulk of the book of Proverbs? Okay, Solomon. Okay, extra credit. Who wrote chapter 31 without peeking? Okay, no extra credit. King Lemuel of Massa. Good thing I had an answer key. All right. So what are the 2 voices that are used in contrast in chapter 2? Wisdom, all right. Use the mic.
Wisdom and folly.
Wisdom and folly, okay. And so we spend several chapters looking at and listening to those voices. Number 3, true what can be attained by those who listen and apply the Proverbs for their life? If I didn't have the answer key, I'd get this one wrong. You're answering what I answered, and it's wrong.
So you say wisdom?
Well, I assumed it was going to be wisdom, but he said he would have missed it, so I said happiness. And he
No,
said
not happiness.
Life,
No,
Peace?
no. George, you got it?
peace,
Huh?
peace,
No, not peace.
love.
Oh, love. Okay, I thought you said something. I thought you said the right answer. It's wealth. Wealth. All right, which let's stop and think about that for a second. What do most people think of when you say wealth? Money and stuff. Is that true wealth? Okay. All right, so Proverbs is not saying if you do all this stuff, or if you do all the Proverbs, you're going to get a lot of stuff. Okay? And unfortunately, there are folks out there preaching a message not too far distant from that. But that's not true wealth. What is true wealth? What is true wealth? You might ought to be peeking at chapter 2.
Peaceful life,
Peaceful life, okay. This is not a trick question. What is true wealth? eternal life, okay, life that lasts. Okay, for some folks, that doesn't sound very good because the life they got's not very good. And you're just telling me I'm going to be stuck in it for a long time. That wouldn't necessarily be very attractive to them. Okay. You know, other thoughts about what true wealth is? Understanding. Okay. Wisdom. Okay. Being able to handle situations because of the wisdom that you get from putting God's word into practice.
Contentment.
Okay, contentment. Okay, we could probably, before Keith gets away, we'll look at some proverbs about contentment. All right, so who? Here he is. I got a microphone. I'll finish this screen, and then you're on your own. Okay. So who speaks to three groups of people in a very loud and public way to get their attention? Wisdom. Okay. All right. So wisdom is, you said the answer was wisdom. The answer is number 4 is wisdom, and she speaks to three groups of people. Who are they? Okay, the simple. Does she speak to the wise? No, she speaks to the simple. Who else? Two other groups.
I'm going to go with foolish.
The foolish, all right, that's 2 out of 3. And we got the third one that I don't think we've talked about that we may get into when we finish the test tonight. The simple, the foolish, and if you're not stupid and you're not foolish and you're arrogant, what are you? Mocker. Okay, the mockers. Okay. All right, so she calls to who, and still in a loud voice. And who does she fix a banquet for? You got three choices to pick from because we already said who she calls out to. All right, Matt.
I think mocker falls off and she just talks to the simple and the foolish.
Now she just talks to one of them, the simple or the foolish. Who says simple? Okay, Karen. Rest of you are wrong. Okay, she's right. Okay. And so she prepares a banquet for the simple in her palace. Kind of hard to talk to the foolish. At least the simple, you may have got at least a chance of educating them a little bit. All right, Keith, come take over and finish the exam.
Yes. All right. Good evening, everyone. So the voice of who is also very loud and very public, trying to ensnare all who will listen. Jackie. Folly. Exactly right. Her voice is primarily tied to what sin in Proverbs? Sexual sin. That's the imagery that we see wrapped around a lot of that conversation. The result of heeding her voice ultimately always results in death, the grave, different words are used there. The what people are characterized by listening to instruction, fear of the Lord, preserving what they've gained, fleeing from sin, disciplined speech, and seek to influence others. Karen? The wise. That's right. Excellent. You guys have been paying attention. The what people are characterized by being mentioned at least, or wait, I did that wrong. Oh, I should have put the answer, see? All right. What do I have there, Dave? What do I have there? Because I think yeah.
I think if you look at the A through F, you can sort of figure out that we're not talking about nice folks.
Right. It's not the wise.
It's not the foolish, it's not the simple.
I think it's the mockers.
Mockers. Mentioned at least 100 times in Proverbs, if I remember right. Dave?
Your answer says wicked.
Wicked. Okay.
Okay.
Wicked. Now I remember when we switched over and talked about the wicked. Wow, I don't even remember doing this slide. That's hilarious. Huh? No. C. By a what tongue? Lying. By being a what witness? False witness. Sowing what among brethren? Discord. There we go. Here we go. Wise people are first and foremost wise unto. I gave you 3 scriptures to reference. Salvation. Why is that wise? That is a biblical foundation throughout Old Testament and New Testament. And it was something I hadn't really thought about until doing this study, just how much emphasis was on those who are trying to make people wise unto salvation. That kind of blew me away. God hates murder, the shedding of innocent blood. There is logically a difference between our English modern translation of murder and killing, warring, which would contradict Scripture a whole bunch if there wasn't a difference there. And I say that because you will hear that quoted in popular media settings about murder and killing being used basically as the same thing. We are not to be all about killing naturally, but there is a difference between how things happened in the Bible when people were killed for various reasons and murder. So far during this Proverbs study, I found the point about what to be a new and interesting take on things. There is no wrong answer here. You've heard it all before. Dave and Jim have taught this so much in the past that there's nothing more I could add to this. Matt, or
I found it interesting to focus on those three groups of people who have yet to become wise or refuse to become wise or heed wise advice. I think when I'm typically reading through it, I'm at the mindset of do this, don't do that, rather than characterizing each command based on those three ways before you become wise, what you're like.
very good. Anyone else on that? And so far during this Proverbs study, I've found myself doing what a lot more? Characterizing people into three categories. Matt?
Well, kind of hand in hand, I've been looking at how decisions are one of those three things. When you take a look at actions that or decisions you might make, or you're seeing what other people are doing, that's folly, that choice is folly, or what they decide to say, that was mocking. Could have said something different there, or that was just downright foolish because you didn't see the effect of this or what was going to happen. Just noticing decisions and actions and categorizing them like that. Then, of course, seeing things that are being done and saying, oh, that was a wise move, or they replied in a wise way.
I would have to absolutely agree with that from my personal point of view. Since starting this, a whole lot of all of that, and my work situation as it is unfolding around me has employed, for pun intended, a whole bunch of my trying to figure out what category does that fall into, and I've seen pretty much all of it at play. Wild stuff. So, Gary.
The only thing I would add is that everything counts.
Yeah.
Everything counts.
Everything counts. And one of our very first studies in here, we talked about the path and being on the right path. And when you're on a path, that's it. If you get off of it, you're not on it. When you're on it, you're on it. I mean, it's a very logical, very simple way to kind of boil it all down, but it really matters. And I think it plays into the New Testament stuff where we start hearing about broad roads and narrow gates and wide gates and all this other stuff. It plays together very well. So that was it. I had a little stall for time, so I hope that wasn't too arduous for anyone. Oh, wow, look at how fast Matt is, man, dude. And we covered the simple, and then, let me make sure I got the scorner here. So they think they know everything, and anyone who tries to teach them is only wasting time. I don't know if you've ever met anyone like that. They show their ignorance by the way they respond to advice or reproof. And I thought this was worth reading. Anytime I have the red up there or whatever, if I seem to be blowing past it, stop me because I meant to read that. So let's go there. Proverbs 9, 7, and 8. If you beat me to it, go ahead and read it. Oh, go ahead.
He who corrects a mocker brings shame on himself. He who rebukes a wicked man.
Have you seen that play out at all? Now, naturally, I think maybe we should address rebuke a little bit. Rebuke sounds a little more, a little harsh at times, but we certainly understand the concept of correction, right? Correct a scoffer, it might not go so well. Correct a wise man, and he will love you. When you hear that, where have you seen that play out, either in your own life or something that you witnessed, that correcting a wise man resulted in a very positive reaction?
I was thinking about the opposite of correcting a scoffer. That plays out every day on social media.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. And Jackie, you had your hand up.
I don't have a specific example, but I think in general, a wise person is someone who I think, as a matter of habit, strives for the truth. And if found to be incorrect about something, will appreciate the fact that he has learned something from it that he can then share with someone else. So I think in general, a wise person appreciates the fact that someone can take the time to help teach him more and make him then more wise.
Right. And you're really hitting on what I was kind of aiming for there. There's a bit of relationship building that goes on there. You try to correct the scoffer, and it kind of creates this divide, if you will. They don't want to hear it. They're pushing back. It's just this kind of contentious thing going on. You correct a wise person, and they may even tell you, wow, I really appreciate that. You know, I hadn't thought of it that way before. It's been good talking to you about this. I wasn't seeing it that way until we started talking about it. You know, that dialogue, that relationship building, is all kind of rooted together there. And I found it interesting.
I kind of thought of two areas of you rebuking a wise man and he will love you. And I think of young children sometimes, you know, when you correct them, and sometimes, and I mean, not all times, but they want affection afterwards. They kind of, they're drawn to the person reaching out to them at times. And I think when I think of especially starting, you know, in the work world, like after college, the people I'll talk about is, well, I'll say, oh, you know, I remember one guy, Jim Baker said, when I was complaining about something at work, told me this example of, it's like you're looking in a window. You can't see the whole room. You're only seeing what's in your view. So talking about trying to be more patient with, you know, things at work and the boss and that kind of stuff, you know. And I always remember that, you know, even I don't think in terms of love, but when someone corrected you and it stuck, and I'm sure there were hundreds of other times where it didn't stick, but you remember, you reference that, I used to have this boss that always said this, and that's it sticks with you because it you know, we were wise enough to let it stick in that instance anyway, you know. And I think kind of the scoffer is almost like sometimes when you're trying to have a conversation with a person and they won't stop talking. You know, they pick a key word you say, and then they go. It's just, you know, diversion, I always called it, but maybe scoffing is the way you start talking to try to make a point, and they jump in and hijack it, and you know, which is just mocking you because, you know, they're not even wanting to hear what you say.
Sure. And we see an aspect of it too in law practice with straw man arguments and stuff like that, to where just all of a sudden this thing comes up and it's like, look over here, look over here, look over here, stop paying attention to the real thing. And it's like, yeah. So, Gary.
You know, I think another example is David, okay? David and his great sin, okay? And being king, nobody else is going to challenge him on that. You know what I mean? So he felt as though he was free to do whatever he wanted to do. And Nathan challenged him, as you know. And I think this is an example of him being humbled to say, oh my goodness, and reflecting on what it is that he's done, and again, reflecting on the fact that he has sinned against God, you know? So a piece of that wisdom is realizing that this is a transaction between me and God. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah. And God using someone perhaps to get a point through to you. And again, I think he does that kind of stuff for relationship building. I mean, it just, to me, it makes some sort of logical sense. The author had the point 3. This is a great example of casting pearls before swine. The scorner knows everything. And you could tell them the best piece of advice that you personally have ever gotten in your life that has transformed you, transformed everything about your life or whatever. They don't care, and they're not listening. And there is a lot of that out there. They show their ignorance by the way they respond to advice or reproof, the other word for that. I highlight toxic person here because I don't know if you're reading a lot of the things on social media in the last couple years. This is a theme going on of late. Who is toxic? How can you tell who is toxic? Here's this list, are you on it? And the scorners, whether they're in the neighborhood, on your job, or even in the church, toxic people spread infection. That resonates with me as a nurse. I get it. And that's a little easier way for me to kind of see what's causing the problem here. If I see a bunch of other people falling under a bad scenario and I see sort of a root cause, if you will, that makes it easier for me to tell, is this person a mocker and a quote-unquote toxic person? Any comment on that? 5 had drive out the mocker, and out goes strife. Quarrels and insults are ended. Kelly and I saw this happen in the intensive care unit at St. Joseph's Main Hospital years ago when both she and I were working bedside. We had a couple coworkers who were mockers. And if they were on and you were on, your 12-hour shift was not going to be fun. Now, working 12s, you often weren't there every single day with them because that's just sort of the nature of how we did things. But it was one of the things where we would walk, our unit is kind of a big U-shaped unit. You'd walk the whole unit real quick when you got in just to see who's on today. Who am I stuck with for 12 hours? And it got so bad that one of our coworkers became the nurse manager. And because she was exposed to all of this for so long, also now she had the authority and she cleaned house. And I'm telling you, it was literally that proverbial light switch that the unit just became an awesome place to work despite how intensive care is, when you are there with the right people, all pulling in the same direction, and you're all trying to help one another, and you're all trying to encourage one another, anything that you do is better when you have that kind of situation. And as soon as I saw that quote, I was like, I remember that. They can even create problems for an entire city. And the Hebrew word here that is used, that mockers stir up a city, conveys the image of someone stirring up a fire or blowing a flame to make it burn more vigorously. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, that has happened in the last 10 years, that there are literally cities who something gets stirred up enough and they'll burn the city down. And so this is sort of a proverbial burning, and in our case, sometimes quite literally literal. And James 3:6 talks about tongues being set on fire by hell. And I thought that was a very interesting tie that I would not have made otherwise to that. So, Danny, did you, or is that just?
James 3:6.
Yep.
The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell.
And this is a common characteristic in scorners and mockers. Scoffers are an abomination to men and to God. And the Lord mocks proud mockers, but gives grace to the humble. And there are lots of verses that kind of play that theme, if you will. But I thought the examples in 2 there were easy ones to recall. The builders of Babel, Pharaoh at the Red Sea, Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, and Herod Agrippa in Judea. Who remembers what happened to Herod Agrippa? Say it.
Eaten by worms.
Eaten by worms from the inside, if I remember right, or whatever. Like, what? And it's there. I remember when I read that, I was a fairly new Christian and trying to even just figure out things about the Bible. That was a head shaker. I was, boy, wow, that's in the New Testament. Okay. The fool. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
So that story happens in Acts immediately after he's up and people are pointing to him and claiming that he is a god. God didn't take that very well, but it makes me think of the verse in Galatians that says God cannot be mocked. And then goes on to talk about fruit and talk about encouraging us that the efforts and the devotion that we have will not go unrewarded. God recognizes that, and that fruit comes from that, and you're not going to fool God. Okay, you're not going to mock God.
Right. And there are some people who have very public platforms and opportunities to disseminate information to large groups of people. I kind of cringe every time I see them very blatantly, openly mocking God, knowing that those stories exist. It's one of those kind of duck and run things where you're hoping that you're not in the vicinity when lightning strikes, if you will. Big time. So the fool is where I wanted to start spending a little more time. This is where a lot of Proverbs, I think, is really kind of focused on helping to address. The English words for fool and folly come from Latin follis, which means bellows, and it also describes a person's puffed up cheeks. Indicates that a fool is a windbag, somebody full of air but lacking in substance, and I'm sure you know some of those. There are 3 different words translated: fool, kisol, the dull, stupid fool who's stubborn, Uil, the corrupt fool who is morally perverted and unreasonable, Nabal, the fool who is like a stubborn animal, the brutish fool. For our sake, we combine all 3. Fools are fools, no matter what name you give them. Fools won't learn from God's word. All right, somebody get Proverbs 1:7. It's up there, or you can read your translation of it.
Is the beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline.
So that's sort of our key pivot text throughout all of this Proverbs study, right? Fools just battle against this for some reason. It's not their low IQ or their deficient education. In fact, most of the people that I have been watching recently playing out this scenario in front of me are highly, highly educated, and they're smart people. They're not just highly educated people, but they're smart people in so many ways, and being foolish. There's no fear of God before their eyes, Romans 3:18. Fear of God, fear of the Lord. Tim had been addressing this recently too. That phrase is something we should meditate on a little bit more. A fool's own father can't instruct him, and if you try to debate with him, it will only lead to trouble. Why? Because fools actually enjoy their folly and think that they're really living. Have you ever seen anyone just utterly steeped in their folly and saying that they couldn't be happier, that they love their life? Everything is perfect. Everything's going well. I don't really need to have whatever it is that you are talking about. It's frustrating, right? Anyway.
I also see it where they're complaining about how horrible their life is, but nothing you have to say has any significance to them.
Right. So just perhaps I might have a thought on that you might want to consider, and no. That is really frustrating when you can see that they are battling hard against things. Fools won't learn from God's word. The one reason fools don't learn wisdom is because they can't keep their eyes focused on what's important. How many people do you know that say the 5 most important things in life aren't their 5 most important things in life? And they typically are anti any of those things and trying to make a go of it. And that's tough. A discerning man keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander the ends of the earth. And it's just hard to have a full focus on what is truly satisfying, on what is truly important, on what can make a difference. They live in a fantasy world and no desire to deal with reality. Fools can't control their speech. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. Fools tend to speak before they know what they're saying and what's being discussed. And somebody mentioned that a minute ago. They're just ready to blurt out and over anything that anyone else is saying. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who heeds counsel is wise. Lies and slander are what fools specialize in, and the wise person won't stay around to listen. When you are hearing a bunch of nonsense, it is more wise to remove yourself. Trying to debate, trying to change a point of view is going to be exceedingly difficult. Not that you shouldn't try. There are times that you're going to have to learn to start weighing when is the right time, and is this moment the right time in this situation? Therein is a life lesson that you are going to keep learning over and over again, how to apply that one. That's tough. That's really tough. Lies and slander are what fools specialize in. It's just not good to stand around. Fools can't control their temper. A fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. Now, that is not a common characteristic of modern American man, we'll say. People go from 0 to 100 really quickly now, with any amount of annoyance, minor or major. A prudent man overlooks an insult. How good are you at looking past an insult? I've had a few this last couple weeks, and one just a couple days ago. And I'm telling you, it's hard to overlook it. It kind of eats at me. Satan is doing his darndest to keep reminding me that the insult was there. And what do I want to do about it? Right? And, you know, being prudent about that is a challenge for me. And it is something that I am trying to immerse myself in. Matt?
I was going to answer your question, how long does an insult stay around to you? And those things stay around for a long time, potentially. I mean, and vice versa. A compliment can stay around for a long time, too. But, yeah, it could scar you right away, and it could change the course of your life. I mean, if somebody says you're not good at reading when you're a student in school, maybe you stop reading, and then you don't learn as much, and then, you know, it kind of compounds on itself, and so, you know, it could hurt for a long time, for sure.
Mm-hmm. All of you are familiar with how much the wrong thing said to someone can affect them. That really can be lifelong. It really can be something that is hard to overcome. When business is being conducted in the city gate, fools should keep quiet if they want to appear wise. Now, the first time I saw, there's 2 or 3 scriptures that really kind of correlate with this one. I was 19 years old or so and running my mouth constantly. And I thought, you know, there's some real truth about if you're just quiet, you appear wise. And it kind of startled me a bit, and it has helped. It has been a good reminder for me every time I think of that or I see that. Even a fool looks wise when they keep their mouth shut. And it is unfortunate that some people think they must always speak at meetings even when they have nothing to say. And I had one of our audience members in mind when I heard that, who happened to work in city government for many years. And I cannot imagine what it would be like to have to go to work and have all those meetings in all those kind of situations. More power to you, brother. So we'll end there. We'll pick up the end of this next week. Any final comments on that? Jerry.
Say this real quickly and hit the point, is that I think the lesson for us is to be able to distinguish between the foolish and the wise, and everything. I just said a few minutes ago, everything counts, everything does count, but at the same time, through Proverbs, God is telling us that we need to be wise in making that distinction between who we're having dialogue with. You know, because everybody is an equal, if you will.
No, excellent point. Anything else? Going once. Have a good evening, and thanks again for being patient and for taking our midterm quiz. I'm sure that caused anxiety, right? It didn't mean to be. I wanted Dave to be my proctor and take all the heat for it, but I happened to get here early enough, so. What's that? There you go, okay. That's right. It'll all be in code. You got to call in and see whether or not you've passed or not. Thank you very much.